You're listening to the IWN podcast. I'm Harley Handy, and all opinions are my own. Yeah, I'm making this podcast to share my opinions on some things. One of the things I'd like to talk about is Port Dover, and the Friday the 13th event that goes on there every year. City Hall in Port Dover in Norfolk County has gotten together and made it so bikes can't be on the streets in Port Dover for the Friday the 13th, and I'd like to say that that is wrong, and that the bikes should be allowed to be on the street, on Main Street. That event has been now taken over by the government. I don't know why. It seems like that town is trying to take over that event to make money for the government, I guess. But it's very sickening to see how much security there is down there now, and how it's totally a government-run event now, and it's totally made it so that people that don't have a lot of money can't go, and it's unenjoyable because it's all vendors trying to make money, and it used to be all about bikes not making money. Um, so it's pretty sickening to see what they've done with that. Um, yeah. Another thing I'd like to talk about is the election in the states. I watched the debates on the TV, and I thought it was just really awful to see the mentality of these politicians. Many of these politicians don't have respect for the law, and they're robbing the country blind. And they keep having wars all around the world for no good reason at all. I'd like to call out Israel's government for the killings over there that they're doing to people that aren't armed, and it's sickening how the civilians in Palestine are being put in the middle of this war, and they never asked to be, and the government will not stop with their division tactics that they're doing. It's sickening that Israel keeps electing Netanyahu after all the crimes that guy has committed. They keep re-electing him into power. At some point, the Israeli people and the Palestinian people need to get together and overthrow that government and take down that wall that's causing so much division. Another thing I'd like to talk about is native rights. In the whole debate that Biden gave, and you know, all those politicians that are running for the Republican debate, you don't hear native rights being talked about at all, and it should be. When you hear those Republicans getting together for their leaders debate, you don't hear about native rights. Even when Biden does his talking pieces for the TV, you don't hear nothing about native rights. It's all about everybody else and not about native rights or native land, or like them giving back land that they stole from the natives, or helping build housing on the reserve. He's not talking about the important issues, like the water on the reserve, how it's polluted all across America. He doesn't want to talk about those issues, and neither do the Republicans. And you still hear people like DeSantis talking about the southern border, and he keeps talking about how he wants to go after all those people that are coming over the border. Meanwhile, DeSantis himself is an immigrant to the United States. And they keep wanting this drug war to keep going, a failed drug war, a war on drugs that has failed over many decades, and many, many, many billions of dollars have been spent on this war on drugs, and the outcome, just look at Kensington down, Kensington, Philadelphia. You see how bad it is. That war on drugs has did nothing but made the problem worse. And they went and closed all the mental health facilities, and their version of mental health care now is they're trying to integrate the police force into like divisions of the police force that go on mental health calls. Well, I think that anything to do with the police and mental health is not a good idea. I think that it should be totally separate, and the police should never have anything to do with mental health calls. And I'm all for bringing people here from other countries if they want to come here, but we need to fix our healthcare system and build more housing, and the politicians aren't doing that. This past Thanksgiving, they gave out ground turkey at the food bank instead of whole turkeys, and they tried to use inflation as an excuse as to why they're not giving out turkeys. Meanwhile, in reality, when you go and search up on Google and you type in food bank director charged, you'll see how many of these directors have been charged for taking money and stealing donations, and all the money doesn't make it to the poor. So, and when people donate, they're donating to these people, and the funding doesn't make it to where it's supposed to go. So and then they use these excuses like, oh, it's inflation, or oh, we can't afford it, or we're running out, or whatever, as an excuse. Meanwhile, it's all at these directors' houses, and in warehouses, that they put it in warehouses to auction off, and they think it's a secret, and it's really not. This is well known for many, many years. These companies, these non-profit people and organizations like the Salvation Army have been caught many times over and over and over for selling donations and keeping money and everything else. So the idea of donate to these agencies and it's going to help the poor is an old way of thinking. These people are so stuck in the past with their thinking. This small town mentality has got to stop because they live in the past. They're so stuck in the past, it's unfucking believable how stuck in the past they are. They don't want to move forward. They're still talking about how they want to mine nickel on stolen native land. For one thing, it's all native land that they're on, and they want to go and mine all this nickel out of the ground. Meanwhile, it's been mined many, many years ago. Many years ago, they were mining for nickel. We need to move forward. They're still talking about going into the past, these conservatives. And it's sickening. It really is. And it's very tiring to keep talking about these issues because it's the same thing over and over and over and over and over again. People are sick and tired of talking about it. The Ring of Fire. They've already mined for gold up there. They already mined for chromite up there. They already mined for all that years ago. When are we going to move forward? We're talking about mining, we should be talking about hemp. When are we going to make hemp products? We're talking about how the planet is being so heated up right now. We're having forest fires all over the place. But we're not talking about how we could grow big fields of hemp instead of cutting trees down to make paper products. They're not talking about these issues. They're too busy living in the past. And in downtown LA, there's a guy on YouTube, and the username is LAOCTV. And the guy drives around all night, and all day, and people give him gifts through YouTube, through this platform, and he's driving around all day, pretending he's a police officer. Claiming, it's basically he's a vigilante, and he's putting people at risk by driving around all day and night for no reason, really, and there's lots of them doing this, and it's like a vigilante type person, and they're creating more problems than anything. In America, Biden and Trump, both combined, both parties, you guys are funding wars all around the world, and you can't even look after your own people, your own native people, your own people that are in your country. And same with Trudeau. You're funding all these wars all around the world, but you can't look after the people that are already here. With the billions and billions of dollars to Israel, why can't Israel go fight their own problems? Why do we got to fund their war over there? We shouldn't be funding no wars anywhere. There should be a vote in the House of Commons in Parliament Hill before our country goes to war, and every person in Canada should have a say. Just like the Ring of Fire. You got articles on here on Google through news agencies, and they're all talking about how natives are really mad about how you're overriding their rights, their treaties and everything, because they don't have a say in this Ring of Fire thing when they should be. They should have a say in everything that goes on, especially when they're the first people of this land. And you guys are just overriding everybody, just saying, we can sit in Parliament Hill, we can sit in Queen's Park, we can sit in the city halls, we can sit wherever and eat donuts and drinking food all day, and everything paid for by taxpayers, and the taxpayers have no say, and we can do whatever we want. Well, fuck you. The public has had enough of that. We have had enough of these politicians being allowed to do whatever the fuck they want. The public is saying no to these politicians that are overriding the public, and they're just doing whatever they please because they want to play like they're dictators. That's going to end because the revolution is going to come globally, and all these people are going to be put out of power. The best way to resolve conflict is through talks, peace talks, talking. We don't do that anymore. Our country is too busy focused on, funding and fueling all kinds of conflict all around the world, and they don't want to sit down and have talks anymore, which is sickening. You know, it's just appalling what they're doing. People are sick and tired of waking up every fucking day listening to this shit. Every fucking day. And it's all you hear is there, and then you see these police officers and they're going around, they're hurting people too. They're hurting people really badly and they're using force and they always fight in numbers and they always fight with weapons because they can't fight one-on-one with no weapons. And it's this, in the military does it, they all do it. And they're the biggest fucking cowards on the planet Earth, these people. And it's just, they have no feeling for anybody else but themselves. This has to stop. This bullying of people. They're bullying people. This is what they're doing. And these city hall people are so crooked, it's unreal. They don't like when the public, questions them. They don't want to be questioned at all. These public people that work for city hall, they when the public goes to question them, they don't like it. They don't want that. They don't want the public to have any form of standing up for themselves at all. And it's terrible what our government has become. Most of these small towns are operated like that, and they have big city halls, big giant brand new city halls now because they amalgamated all the communities now, and so they have big giant city halls, brand new police stations, all this for themselves, but they can't get housing to the poor people. They got money for war, but they can't help the poor. And it's really bad, and even these companies, they got storage companies. The company's employees are taking things out prior to the auctions, and then people buy too high, buying all the lockers to show how greedy you are, showing people's personal belongings on camera, degrading them, it's and here in Canada, you watch all the stuff in the States with storage lockers, you watch that in the States, and they're allowed to have flea markets, in the States. Here in Canada, we don't have, we're not allowed to have flea markets in parking lots. They won't allow that unless you have a permit and all this kind of stuff, and why isn't it that, why can't Canada make it so that people can have, like a flea market in a parking lot without having all those permits, and in the flea market buildings here in Canada, just to have a table, it costs hundreds and hundreds of dollars. So the whole storage locker thing, it's a great business, but it just needs the laws around it need to change. And how come the churches are not paying taxes? These churches should be paying taxes too. How come when you go to a church nowadays, you see the parking lot's just crumbling? The infrastructure's just crumbling, and they get all this funding from the government, and they pay no taxes. Why is that? Why is it? And and they're supposed to be helping the poor, and they're not. They're not really helping the poor. And they're getting a lot of money from the government. These charities, all these charities are the same. The heads of the charities, if you go into the history on Google, and you type in newspapers.com and you type in church pastors being charged, charity heads being charged, you start to see how crooked these people actually are. Even the storage companies, the employees are taking things before the auction. They weren't, you're not supposed to do that, but they're doing that, and they've been charged for it. These employees at the storage yards, and they're all these people, and that work in these companies are crooked. In the city halls are crooked. The government's crooked. They're all like that way, And even the Children's Aid Society's crooked. They're all crooked. All these people are crooked, and there's no accountability, And there's no oversight. There's not enough oversight. There's no accountability because you keep seeing the same things over and over. Even teachers, they're getting charged, these teachers. And there's no accountability because if there was, it wouldn't keep happening over and over and over and over, decade after decade. All these people, because there's no accountability. That's why. There's no accountability. So there needs to be more oversight and more accountability for the government people that are doing crimes and not being held accountable. So that's what's happening. Even though you don't want to admit it, that's what's happening. There's no accountability for crooked government employees. There's no accountability because they're allowed to do whatever they want. Because look at how over time, how many over and over and over and over have been charged with crimes, and they're all government employees and government heads of corporations, all this, even sergeants in the military, sergeants in the cops, they're all crooked, and there's no accountability. Once they've been charged and found guilty, then they just give a meaningless sentence, and then another one comes in or whatever, and same with the fire department, same thing. Crooked fire chief, okay, well, we'll replace the fire chief, a new one, and give the other guy that got charged, found guilty, whatever, a minimum sentence. So there's no accountability. But if that was somebody that was like not a government person, they would get maximum sentence. That's how they're operating this. And it's like the government, there's no accountability. There's never been accountability for years, And all these wars, there's a new war every year now. Like every year, there's another new war that they're creating because they keep creating conflict in other countries because what they do is the same thing they do here at home. In our country and other countries around, they pay people to go and divide people. Division people and they're even paying people to do arsons. They're paying people to do arsons. They're paying people and they're dividing the population. And this is how they do it to start their wars all around the world. They create division first, and then once they get everybody fighting with each other, they love it and they feed off of it. The government does. They love when there's division and conflict because then that's when they make their money. Mainstream media does the same thing. If there's no money in the story, they won't go anywhere near it because they're looking to make money. That's all it is. It's all about money. Everything is about money. And when it comes to accountability, there's none. And then they'll even go as far as using children for their arguments. Like, they're a big baby, whatever. That's they're using children for their arguments. That's what they're, how could you even say that's normal? But that's what they're doing. They're using old mentality. That's the old mentality of thinking, calling somebody a big baby, this is their mentality, and it doesn't make no sense what they're even saying because it's like, just like the jails, they'll put people in jail. Meanwhile, that's the same thing they do with babies. They put the babies in jail, in a crib. And they think that's going to solve the problem. That doesn't solve problems, caging people, just like caging animals. It doesn't solve anything. You can't keep caging animals and caging people. You got to address the problems. They're still back in this old 1920 to 30s way of thinking. They love that way of thinking of the old way works best. It doesn't work best. Time to get out of the past. Sometimes I think they forget the same people that built the new cars that we got today, the new vehicles, the new motorcycles, all the plastic pieces of shit vehicles that we got. They were all built by fucking people from the 1930s and 40s that had these designs of let's build these new cars and blah, blah, blah. Okay, if it was so great, why do we got pieces of shit cars now? We had people that were in the past that were actually had some good ideas. One of them was Henry Ford, the guy that was in the past, that said we should make fuel and have vehicles and all that kind of stuff. But guess what? The government said, no, we don't want that. We don't want that kind of technology, so we're going to suppress it. Just like they do with solar now, they do with wind, they do it with everything. All these conservatives, they don't want anything to do with it because they want to live in the past with their old mining and logging and old bullshit. The old small town way of thinking, the old KKK way of thinking, the old white supremacist way of thinking. They want to keep that going, and they're mad that the younger generation is not following along. People like Donald Trump and all those people are mad because they're starting to lose their grip on all of their power that they had before. They thought they could keep dominating, and keep the young people glued to this old narrative of thinking, America's been racist for years, But now it's time to change that. And these old fuckers that are like fucking 90 years old, that are like it's still living in the past, want to keep hanging on to that mentality because that's what they thrive on, and at least I got to say, at least Biden, when he gave his speech, there is one thing I'd like to say about it. At least he has some morals in a way of thinking about you can't be racist. Donald Trump he just doesn't care. He's a racist dude. He's been that way for years. His dad was the same way, and he taught his kids to be the same way, and it's shameful because his kids now have the same mentality as he has. A lot of these wealthy people, they've never had to live a hard day in their life, so they don't know what it's like to be poor, and they don't know what trauma is. So they don't really know about how all that is. So they've lived a life of never having to deal with all that. So when the time comes that they do have to deal with hardship, they have a hard time with it because they're so used to having all the money and everything there. The vehicles, the house, all that kind of stuff. They're used to all that, so they don't know how to live poor. I've been homeless, so I know what it's like to not have anything, and I can be happy with nothing. They can't. That's the problem. They can't be happy with just living life. They have to have more, and they want more and more and more, and they will not stop until they get more. Pierre Poilievre is trying to replicate Donald Trump. Donald Trump is his time in politics is over pretty much. But Pierre Poilievre would like to replicate that guy because that's the guy he worships. He worships Donald Trump. Pierre Poilievre loves Donald Trump. And Pierre Poilievre, he thrives off of conservatism, and he lives in the past. He's very much in the past still, that guy. He doesn't want to go forward. He's against everything that's green energy. He doesn't want to go forward. He wants to go back to the old colonial times of the 1930s, where you could beat your wife and kids and bring back corporal punishment in schools and keep going after gay people and trans people and things that they shouldn't be doing. They've tried that many years ago and it failed. There's so many more important things to talk about than bathrooms and transgender issues. As far as being, their issues are important, but I'm just saying, like, bashing trans people and gay people for their sexual orientation is such a thing that is in the past. Like, that's something that was tried many years ago and it failed. Why do you want to keep that going? Because you're just ignorant and you thrive on the ignorance of it. Obviously, you like that. That makes you happy that you can pick on people like a fucking bully would do. They're being bullies, these politicians. They like to bully their weight around. Doug Ford, he's the biggest bully around. And that's because his dad taught him, just like Donald Trump's dad taught him, how to be a good bully. How to bully people around and use their weight and their money and everything else to bully people and get their way around the world. And my way or nothing, that's the way they think. And it's all about that way. Of thinking of, I got money and I got power and you don't, so I'm going to bully you. And that's what they think. And how dare you be for green energy? How dare you, support native rights? How dare you, that's what they think. And it's like, I'm supporting everybody, everybody. Why? Like, how could you sit there and say, to the future generations, we don't want to keep moving forward, we want to go backwards into time, because the forward way doesn't involve the ways of the past. We're not talking about leaving people of the past in the past. We're talking about building, our healthcare better so that maybe, when the future generations of tomorrow, when they get old, they don't have to deal with the situations we have today that are really awful. One being nursing home falling apart. They're rationing diapers, for fuck's sakes. They're rationing things that, they shouldn't have to. Things like, and even, the facilities are all outdated. We don't have mental health care anymore, really. All that stuff. What about when the future generation gets old? Because everybody gets old. What about that? What about when they get old? What are they going to have to deal with when they get old? And at 30, I'm 30, you know, okay, but like, what about when I get old? I don't want to deal with all the issues we have right now. This is what I'm saying is like, we have to think about the future, and we're living now, right? But we got to think ahead about what about a long time from now, because we're going to have to deal with things a long time from now. And they're not thinking that way. They're thinking, oh, we'll just keep doing things the old way. It doesn't matter, we'll keep doing things the old way and it'll be fine. Don't worry about the planet, we got, and they keep saying that, don't worry about, don't worry about the future. No, we should be living in the now, but also worried about our future. Quit telling us that we shouldn't worry about the future, because we should be worried. There's no reason why we can't move forward with hemp products. I've even heard the politicians a couple days ago, they were even talking, let's ban disposables. Okay, but you're not thinking the right way of thinking, because we could be making hemp paper products that are disposable. Cloth products are great and all, but they also are pollution too, because look at how much clothing's being thrown away. And cloth diapers it's cloth and it goes in the landfill and it's bad. We have 2-liter pop bottles that are thick plastic. They're talking about a diaper that takes 500 years to decompose. But what about the 2-liter plastic pop bottle that's way worse than a diaper? They're not thinking about that. They're not thinking about the plastic milk bags that are like, when you buy one thing of milk, there's 3 bags plus a bag. And then they're not talking about the issues of a lot of the other things, like bottled water. What about bottled water? People are buying disposable bottled water, and the water bottles are all going in the landfill or whatever they're going, because people don't recycle really enough and all that. So, like, why can't we be making all that out of hemp too, right? Like, this is what I'm talking about. But they're not talking about those issues because they don't want people to talk about it. They don't want to talk about it. They don't want other people to talk about it because they want to keep living in the past. They want to keep doing things the old way. They don't want to go forward. And the small towns especially, if you go to a small town, they all say that. We don't want to switch. How dare you come here and want to switch? Well, we're not talking about going to your town and switching things. We're talking about your town is being polluted. Your small towns are being polluted by mills, okay? Look around. The mills that are in the small towns, they're all polluting the air. You could barely breathe. The water's being polluted. Look at Grassy Narrows. They had a mill there and it polluted all the water, from the mill, Kimberly Clark, Huggies diapers and pull-ups, all that kind of stuff. Yeah, that polluted the water. All the water there got polluted because of those plants that were there with all the glue and all the chemicals that goes into making those products. So if you had a hemp field, if you had hemp, you could be making disposable hemp diapers and hemp pull-ups that, and tampons and everything else out of hemp, and you wouldn't have all that pollution that you do with tailings ponds and runoff from the mills. But you don't want to think about that. You don't want to think about those ways of doing things. You keep wanting to go into the back of ways of doing things of the old way. The old way worked better, so let's keep doing it that way. Well, the old way, there's a lot of bad things with the old way that you're not thinking about, that you should be, That when we made cars the old way, there was steel, like, real good hard steel, that they were making the vehicles with. Now it's all plastic, and but the thing is the old way was great in a way that there was cars were built a lot better, but at the same time, look at the pollution, right? So if you could make a car that had the same strength as steel, like hemp. They talk about how hemp is really strong. So if you could make the car parts out of hemp, right, or a stronger way of doing it, like carbon fiber or something like that, but also do it in a way that doesn't involve so much plastic. Now, with the plastic, there's so much plastic. It's so unsafe, these vehicles. It's unbelievable, and they're driving these big ass trucks all around, and they're way too big, these trucks that they're driving, and they're big plastic hunks of crap that they're driving around, and they put these big ass mufflers to make it sound like it's really big, mean, and tough, and it's really a big piece of shit. I laugh at it. I think it's funny because they're big, giant fucking hunks of shit that they're driving around in. You know, and they think they look so fucking cool driving these big fucking trucks, and they look so stupid. You know. And meanwhile, they had old trucks from a long time ago, but the same thing, eh? All pollution, this big fucking plumes of pollution. They can't, What about hemp fuel? Like, you never thought about hemp fuel? Like, what about hemp fuel? You could have hemp fuel and burn hemp fuel, and it would be way less toxic than diesel and all the fucking really bad fucking fuel. But they're still in the past thinking, oh, we could keep using diesel, and we could still keep using all this oil. They're not thinking about the hemp. They're not thinking about, oh, we could make a hemp fuel and it wouldn't be so toxic to our fucking kids' health. No, we won't think about that. We're gonna keep acting like a fucking lumberjack back in 1930. Yeah, and another thing is our healthcare is like, we don't have enough facilities for people to be able to get healthcare, the proper healthcare. Now that we've closed down all the mental health facilities. So, but we need to improve home care too. Our home care is really short-staffed, and so we need more staffing there. And Northern Ontario is the worst for that. And the accessibility, I know I've mentioned before, but our accessibility for disabled people is really bad. Like, if you're disabled, young or old, it's very hard to get around because there's no washrooms with proper change tables for adults, that have incontinence issues too. So how could we make that better so that the people that do have those issues can get out and about without having to stay inside because they can't find a place to change and all that kind of stuff. So, but the accessibility and even ramps to get into places, there's a lot of places that don't have ramps. So if you're in a wheelchair, or a scooter, it's very hard to get into one of those places that you need to go to because they don't have a ramp. Now, there's a lot of other issues. Another big issue that I've talked about before is the schools and people that have disabilities. Now, the schools are not geared for people that have disabilities. So they have EAs, a lot of them, like educational assistants, workers, should I say, or PSW sort of workers to help with that. But the problem is that they should have nurses that are there at the school that help with those issues, but they don't, because you end up hearing a lot of articles that they're talking about how teachers are left to change soiled diapers or whatever. So they should have nurses that are there, not teachers, dealing with health issues. So, because we're all sick of hearing the articles that are coming out saying that the teachers are sick of dealing with health issues. Well, if you go on the internet and you type in teachers' health issues, New York Times, I think it is, or LA Times, one of those two, you'll find the article from 1990s, early 1990s, talking about how they were complaining about that then. So it's not a new problem, it's an old problem. And even England, they talk about these issues with potty training in school and all that kind of stuff. But it's an old issue. It's not new. It's a very old issue that's been going on for many years that they never addressed. And this is the problem with healthcare too. There's a lot of issues with healthcare because they've just put it on the wayside. They don't care. It's about money. They're more worried about making money than they are actual healthcare. And it's there's no reason why we have patients, in the hospitals for so long as they are, and that's because the government doesn't want to improve healthcare. It's very sad to see, that people are just shoved away into hallways, into like rooms by themselves, and it's because they have a disability, or they don't have enough staff to deal with it. It shouldn't be that way, but that's the way it is because our government lets it be that way. You know, if there was more accountability and more oversight, things would get done. And then we'd have better health care. You know, but these politicians, instead of getting the jobs done that they're supposed to do, they play games with it so they can make money. And so that results in having poor education, poor hospitals, poor everything in terms of services. Even people with autism have a hard time because there's no proper services. Doug Ford cut all the autism funding. So, and the people that are on OW, well, good luck getting any help if especially if you have kids. A single person can barely afford a place. Let alone anything else. I mean, you're broke by the time you pay your rent, pretty much. And the renting cost here in Canada is outrageous. The rent's got to come down, and we need rent control. We have to have rent control. And that depends on if the population actually stands up and tells Mr. Doug Ford, man, that he should put rent control in place. But he probably won't because he's a bully. And that's what bullies do. They don't want you to have anything good. They want to bully you. So that's the way he is. Right now, to get a family doctor is impossible. I've been in a town of 400,000 for 5 years, and I still don't have a family doctor. This is how bad it is. Up north, it's really bad. Their health care is really bad. I've said this many times. They have old, outdated equipment and very, very short-staffed. They struggle a lot with health care up there. And our government doesn't really seem to care because they're too busy making money down south, so they don't really care. And even if they separated the north from Ontario, it still wouldn't matter because their government up there is crooked, and it's even worse crookedness than it is down south. Their municipalities are crooked, their mayors are crooked, their services are all crooked. And it's been that way for years because of the racial tensions in the communities, the small communities. I used to live in Port Stanley, and they used to complain about the noise. You couldn't have music on the weekends and stuff like that because these people in the small towns, they don't like fun, eh? They're trying to turn these small towns into retirement communities for old people because but it's okay for the old people when they were young to have fun, but not the young of today to have fun. Apparently this is what they're saying, and they're saying the young people are just looking for attention, and that's not true. These older conservatives, they're trying to keep their grip on power because they fear a day without their colonial dictatorial government and law. They fear that day when that all ends. They fear that day. They don't want their colonial conservative reign to be over. So they fear all the people that are against colonialism. They don't like those type of people. And this is what they're doing. These conservatives, and they like to blame children. They always say that the children are the problem. Meanwhile, it's the conservative adults that are the problem. I read an article, and it was an article on Google about how the Nova Scotia police were going after students in Nova Scotia. There's no accountability for these police officers that are going after children. And they keep saying that the children are the problem. No, it's not. It's the adults that are the problem. The conservative adults that can keep wanting to blame children for the problems that the adults are creating. It's just like here in London where, they tried to blame all the students for Fleming Drive riots. Meanwhile, it was okay for the old people to have fun back in the day. They had their fun, but it's not okay for the young people of today to have fun. Shame on the Nova Scotia police for doing what they're doing to the young people. This is ridiculous. And these police officers, there's no accountability either for what they're doing to all these people around the world. They're going around terrorizing people. These police officers. It's sickening. We're tired. We're tired of this. We're tired of the police going around oppressing people. Okay? We've had enough of that. This conservative ideology of using violence to solve conflict doesn't work. When are you going to wake up and realize that? These conservatives, they all say they want respect from children. Well, you're not going to get respect from children by hitting children or jumping on children. So quit thinking that that's how you're going to get respect, because it's not. Using violence doesn't solve anything. Another thing that I don't agree with is using dogs to go after people. The police like to use dogs and train dogs to be evil and go after people. That's abuse. You talk about abuse of animals. That's abusing an animal, teaching it to go after people. I'm against having dogs as a police tool to go after people. That's wrong too. You should question that. And yeah, I watched the Midas Touch on YouTube quite a bit, but I think that you should be funding your own network. You shouldn't make the public fund your network. And there's been talk on that show about addiction issues with our youth. And yeah, there is a lot of addiction issues, and one of them is being overly medicated. There's a lot of people that are overly medicated on big pharma. In my 30 years of being alive, I have never been one to take medications, or even cough medication, or Advil, or aspirin, or Tylenol, because I think it's bad for you. And it makes the situation worse. So does surgery. These are things that people need to start questioning. But, we're told not to question, and we're supposed to get the vaccines and shut up. This is what these conservatives are telling us, and liberals even too. They're saying, we should just go get the vaccine, shut up, not question anything, and don't worry about the long-term side effects of what all this stuff is doing to us and our kids. And they don't want to give anybody a raise on minimum wage. They want you to keep working for your boss while your boss gets paid large amounts of money and you get paid hardly nothing, and waiting for a trickle down, waiting on the trickle down. That's what they keep saying, and it's like you should be happy with the little piddlings that you get from your boss, and keep being a slave for our system to keep running, our corporations to keep running. Keep being a slave, keep waking up every day, making a little bit of money, and we make all the big money and laugh at you. This is what they're doing, and people need to question what they're doing, what the government's doing. Instead, they're just being conformists. They're conforming to what they want you to be. They just want you to be a slave for them while they make all the money and you get laughed at. And, sooner or later, our population is going to uprise and say no more of this stuff. No more of these corporations making all this money off of people and making people be slaves. Look at the grocery stores. $9 for a pie? How can anybody that's homeless survive? This is terrible, and nobody even seems to be questioning it. And Trudeau's answers, all these people, they all got rhetoric, their own rhetoric, and it's all meaningless while people are starving to death. What about our homeless that are starving to death on the streets, you assholes? Donald Trump, he tries to sit there and say, I did so much. No, you didn't. Look at Kensington. You did fuck all. Those people are starving to death. They have nothing. They're all addicted to big pharma dope. What'd you do when you were in power? Nothing. You did nothing. You made the problem worse. In terms of the Israel-Palestinian conflict, America has given so much money to Israel over the past, I don't know how many decades, a long time, billions and billions and billions of dollars. If it wasn't for America, Israel would not even be able to fight any wars. And Israel has to stop electing Benjamin Netanyahu to power. They need to overthrow that guy and get him out of power. He is a lunatic, and he is a warmonger, and he should be charged for war crimes. Israel and Palestinians need to get together and overthrow that whole government and topple that wall and get rid of that wall and finally have peace. Because what we're seeing in Canada with the problems over there, it's awful. How dare Netanyahu even think that what he's doing is normal? It's sickening. It is sickening what's going on globally. And yes, the people on ODSP need help, but the people that are on single welfare are most affected more than anybody else right now, that are struggling the most, and they're not being helped. So I do hear a lot of people saying about, the people on ODSP, they don't get enough. Yeah, well, the people that are on OW single welfare, they don't get enough either. Okay, and they're the ones being affected the most right now, being not being able to get enough help to survive. And the government doesn't do anything to help them at all. Basic income is what's really needed for everybody, so everybody gets an equal amount and nobody's arguing over who gets more and whatever. There's no jobs. If there was jobs, people wouldn't need all this the assistance programs, but there's no real jobs. And and it's sickening what the government is doing. Doug Ford says everybody should just get a job and basic income is not what's needed. Well, he's wrong. Basic income is a good thing, and we do need basic income. And people on ODSP, they don't get enough. But the people on OW are affected more than the people on ODSP because they get less than people on ODSP. And another thing is you can't get ODSP unless you go through the testing at the hospital and go through the testing and get diagnosed, because they won't give you ODSP unless you're diagnosed with a disability. And there's a lot of people on ODSP that don't even have a disability. I only had my mother for 1 year, and my dad died when I was 8 in a rehab center in Toronto. And my mother was murdered in 1995, and I got no compensation at all. I was left in the dust. Anyway, thanks for taking the time to listen to my video. It's greatly appreciated.